understand some of what I say because of my slurring the words.
I'm hearing your clear so far.
So far, so good.
So far, so good.
And sometimes I'm better than other times, so let's hope this is one of the good times.
Okay, I have another question. You gave me this shingle from the old church steeple that has a little painting of a church on it?
Yes.
And it has a little dedication when they finished and put the steeple and the bell up?
Yes.
Was that given to you as an award, or how did you get that?
That was given to me by John Weidman, and I think he just took an old shingle and did that ad hoc. You know John Weidman.
Oh, very well. I mean, Scott and I are both hosting artists for the symposium this year. So we see
wonderful.
John every day.
Oh, wonderful.
So it was given to you, but he said he did not paint it.
Oh, he didn't paint it? So you must have got it from somebody else. Whatever he says is okay, because he gave it to me, and I don't think he ever fully explained it. But it was from the steeple.
John, about others.
He might have told you that we had quite an adventure with the steeple, because we got it down on the ground, and then we had to do all the work on it and get it back up on the steeple again. And it was a major, major job. And we ran out of money, so we couldn't hire anybody to do it. And John did it. John had been hired to do what he did do, but then there wasn't enough to finish. I don't know if he told you that.
He has told me some, and I'll catch up to him with that story. He'll tell me about it. And here again, we've had it hanging. You know, they reopened the village store.
I didn't hear that.
Somebody bought the village store.
Yes.
And it's open now.
Yes, I know. I'm excited. I went in and talked to them.
I took the shingle, and it's hanging down there with a note under it. Did you paint me? But Sherry took a photo of it and put it on her Facebook. We're still trying to find out who painted it, but we may never find out. But
John would be your only clue.
Yeah. Well,
because
again, this is donated by Betty Hall.
Right.
Okay. So that. Okay. When you and I talked, you said you wanted me to write the history of Hall's manufacturing.
Right.
You gave me a photo album with all the newspaper articles and all your brochures and things. When I finish with that, do you want me to give that to the Historical Society?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't even remember all the things I gave you. I was just
you gave me
a big box of stuff that I hadn't gotten around to throwing away.
Oh, Nancy might be interested in this. So we had a nice little sit down, and you gave me a number of things.
Oh, that's good. I meant to.
And
I had been saving them over time.
Oh, I know. But when I finish writing up about that, then I will give that to the society also.
Yes, it all goes to the society. And if there's anything inappropriate, I hope you'll get rid of it. Because I don't even know all I gave you.
I don't think you gave me anything that was inappropriate. But I have interviewed some interesting people. And they have said things, and I won't bother repeating them now, and I said, I don't think I can put them in my report.
Well, I could have told you some stories that really wouldn't have been appropriate. So.
Oh, I'm sure. But I've been researching the old Speedway, the racetrack.
That was the thing we were working on first.
We were talking about that, and of course I have no notes. So you said something about some of the people in town were in favor of it, and some were not.
Right.
So who was in favor of it?
Oh gosh,
I mean, in general. I don't mean names, but.
Or why were they?
Well, I think the people who felt their taxes were too high and they were having trouble keeping up with the costs of the appreciation of their house values. They couldn't. It was really hard to pay taxes for some of the people who had lived in the town a long time. And they thought that was something that would help bring some money back into the town. So
Now,
those were old timers who were relatively not affluent.
Mm-hmm.
They really had. Everybody has trouble paying their taxes, I think, but there's some people who find it almost impossible to do it, and it's really, really difficult for them. And many houses in Brookline in my early days, got sold at that time because they absolutely couldn't afford to pay the taxes. They really couldn't. So they sold their houses, and many of them were remodeled and fixed up, and they look wonderful now. You never guessed that they were.
Well, the people who were not in favor
people that owned them and built them and lived in them for most of their lives were not wealthy people and not people that had houses that looked like that. And they didn't look like that for a long time.
So,
I always thought when I came up to Brookline as a young girl, I think I might have told you this, that Brookline was a poor town, and it was during the Great Depression. There was no work for anybody. My grandmother had her business in the building across the street. I think I probably did tell you that. And she had the only business in town, and she kept people going through the Great Depression, or some of them might not even have made it without her help. So it was a poor town.
what did your mother provide in terms of business?
I didn't hear that.
What was your mother's business? What was she providing in town?
My grandmother, I'm talking about. She had the Perrin Gift Company. Did I tell you about the Perrin Gift Company?
Is that P-E-R-R-I-N?
No, it was one R.
One R?
P-E-R-I-N. And look, all I think about it, I found a label when I was doing my very last cleanup down there from the Perrin Gift Company, a mailing label, and I stuck it in my book, and I have it, and I'll give it to you today.
Okay, I'll remind you.
I think you'll like it. Should I get it?
I will remind you before we
You
leave.
remind me, okay.
So the people who did not want the racetrack,
They were mostly people who had moved to town to bring up their children in the country and to have and to take advantage of the beauty of the town and the recreation in the town, and they didn't want that kind of recreation in the town. So they were pretty adamant that they didn't want it. So it was the newer people who, in general, objected to the racetrack, and the people who had lived in town a long time thought it was going to be helpful to raise the economic level of the town, and they supported it. So that was my perception of the difference between the people who were for it and were against it. But there were many people who were mixed about it, you know, including me. I had grown up coming up to the town for years when it was a poor little town, and I felt sorry for the people that didn't have enough money to be able to pay their taxes and continue to live in their homes. And so in that sense, I wanted to welcome any business that would raise the economic level of the town. And I did an awful lot of work to raise the economic level, and it was one of the reasons I ran for the legislature. I thought I could be helpful by being in the legislature. So I had that motivation, but at the same time, I had 5 kids, and I wanted them to be able to run free in the community and have a wonderful childhood and freedom and all of that sort of thing. And I thought that the racetrack might attract people that would be change the character of the town, and so I didn't want it. And in the end, I didn't want it more than I did want it, so I worked against it. And I lost almost every battle, and then I finally won the war because they got into it, and not enough people came to make it economically feasible for the racetrack. So that was my thinking about why some people were for it and some were against it. But
I interviewed one of the men who raced there.
yes,
Ron Bouchard, and he said as a kid they loved coming. They would come up many times during the week even to Brookline
yes,
for the ice cream,
yes,
for Riverside Cafe.
yes.
And he said the people in Brookline were wonderful people to be around.
Well, I can see that there were a lot of people. There was a very mixed thing. People felt mixed up about it, even the ones that chose sides, and a lot of them never chose sides. They just watched what was happening, and it was a lot of contention that made a lot of people uncomfortable. And I didn't like the contention. I thought it was too bad. It wasn't good for the town. And I think that's one of the reasons I ultimately opposed it vigorously.
So it went to a vote to the entire town, or did it go that far?
No, it went to a vote of the entire town, and the town voted for it, is my recollection. But that's what I meant when I said I lost all the battles, and then I finally won the war because they couldn't make a go of it after all the contention and all the battles and everything was done, and it was settled that we were going to have a racetrack, and we ran the racetrack, and it became more unpopular after it was running because it was very noisy. And the kids couldn't sleep at night, and they had races at night. At first we tried to restrict them from having night lights, and they won that battle. And so that's what I mean when I say they won all the battles, but they lost the war, because they couldn't sustain it once they got it.
Do you remember?
But it lasted about a year, I think, or maybe 2 years.
No, it lasted about 10
1 or
years.
2 years. What did your research show?
I haven't checked on it, but it started in the 50s and went into the 60s. It was almost a decade.
Oh, really?
Really.
I would not have said it was that long.
Yeah.
It seemed as if they went. I think they went downhill really fast. It never really caught on because at that time it was a little bit too far out in the country. And
Well, it was never sanctioned by NASCAR because it was too short a track. And that also would have...
right. So anyway, it was an interesting thing.
Do you remember the names of any of the men who raced their cars there?
No, I never got to know any of them. I was on the wrong side of that issue for them.
Well, I have one more thing that we talked about. Mr. Wow. What did you do with Mr. Wow?
Oh gosh,
You wouldn't give it
I've
to
got a Mr. Wow around here now, and where did I put him? I don't know if I can find him or not. And I
I
don't,
hope so.
well, I don't think I'm going to be ready to donate that to the Historical Society because my kids used to love them. I used to have a lot of them.
Well, who's
Did
that?
didn't I tell you about, did I tell you about Annie Quigley?
Oh, I have some notes about her.
Yes.
But who had the idea?
Well, my grandmother had, in her business, her gift business, had a lot of items that she bought, and then she actually had some things that she had people make for her that were her idea. And Annie Quigley made the first
I have that in my
one,
notes. Mhm.
and it turned out to be extremely popular. And it sold very well in her business. And it was a fairly complicated to make. And my husband worked out all of the problems of how to put the fringe around the eye of the owl. He made it out of yarn. And how to stitch it on and how to stuff it and all of that.
Yeah, I have those notes.
That was, it was a real challenge to put an item like that into production and teach the operators how to sew on these eyes and the beak and
Have you ever
the
seen that?
wings.
Oh, I have photos of it.
You have photos.
photos.
Yeah, I think I found photos, but I do have just one left.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids grew up with it, and I really am not ready to give it away. Maybe someday they'll give it to the Historical Society.
But I do have the.
But you'll have pictures.
I have. Who wrote the story that goes with that?
Pardon?
There's a little story
Yes,
that goes with that. Who wrote the story?
my grandmother.
Oh.
She was the producer, and my husband was the production manager. He put the idea into action, and they sold a lot of them.
Now, did you sell them at the manufacturing?
No, it was her product. We made them for her.
Okay, they were sold.
So they were sold through the Perrin Gift Company.
Oh. So when was the story written? Was it written at the same time as you produced the album?
Yes, and it was probably back in the 1960s, I would say.
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
So the story and the owl were kind of linked at the same moment in terms of creation.
Right. Well, she had Annie making them individually, one at a time on order before my husband actually started to work out how to mass produce them. So, but I think the story was written when the mass production started because part of the charm was the packaging and the little story. And so they were packaged and in a transparent and one time we kept them in that shop across the street. Maybe I don't know if I remember to tell you this or not, but I'm remembering it now. We had a storage room where we kept Mr. Wowell's ready for shipment when she gave us an order to ship them to a store or wherever. She sold a lot of them to stores. And so we had a flood, and that whole room was full of water. And these Wowells were in packages, and we had to open all the packages, dry them all out, and repackage them. It was a real disaster. And I can remember picking up those soggy packages of owls and lugging them outdoors and opening them up and letting the water run out of what went into the packages. It was a real disaster. But we salvaged them and they sold. After we salvaged them, we sold them cheaper. And
well, I have a lot of notes about that. Fortunately, I took notes before. And Annie Quigley was the grandmother to our present chief.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that was Bill Quigley Sr.'s mother.
Yes.
Yeah.
Annie Quigley was the grandmother of our present police chief.
And her husband was Bill Quigley.
That's
So
right.
It would have been.
Yeah.
He was
Our Bill Quigley is number 4.
Yes. Okay.
And his son is number 5.
Yeah.
so maybe it was his great-grandmother. I'm not sure about that.
I'd have to go back and.
Bill Quigley would tell you which generation it was, but I always assumed it was his grandfather and grandmother.
Now, what was the name of the owl? Was it Wow?
He called him Mr. Wowell.
Wow. W-O?
W-O-W-L. And she had a little verse that when I think you've got that little verse. And he's really mighty sweet and the children love him. And I almost can say the verse, but I can't remember it exactly. But anyway, it turned out to be a much bigger project than we had any idea of. When Annie couldn't make them fast enough for my grandmother's business, then we took over with our business, which was a sewing business. And my husband designed how to make them, and I managed the operators and stitchers who worked on them and did all of that kind of part of the thing. And I get to give you hopefully a story about Hull manufacturing. I don't know, I could talk about that forever because we were in business together for 25 years, and then I carried it on by myself for another 25 years. And it turned out to be a lifetime thing for me, even though I did a lot of other things besides, like run for the legislature on my bicycle.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you a question. Talking about Mr. Wow, how many units did you think you sold or created?
Oh, I have no
Thousands.
idea.
Would it be thousands? Would it be?
Well, it would be thousands, but
Yeah.
whether it would be up in the hundred thousands,
Really, that many?
oh well, I don't think that. I think that would be a high estimate. But it was a lot of Mr. Wowells, and boy, I can tell you when we were lugging all those out of the warehouse room where they were soaking wet, I thought there were 1 million. And we always had them made them ahead so that we have them ready for my grandmother to ship right away. And she did a lot of mail order business, and so did we. Actually, I think at one time I put Mr. Wowell in my catalog, and she had it in her catalog, because it didn't make any difference to us really whether she sold them or we sold them. We were pretty.
I have copies of those catalogs.
Oh, do you? Mm-hmm. Oh, good.
Oh, Betty gave me all kinds of good stuff.
Okay.
Okay, what year did you start Hull manufacturing? The very beginning.
Well, I think I told you 1951, and I think that's correct.
Okay, and I know. Okay, You're
A lot
100%.
of my memory of numbers is not really reliable,
If you
so
can answer these quick questions with just a little, if you can't remember, that's fine. You said that before you did the Halls Manufacturing, that Sid worked for Textron,
that's correct.
and he created covers for steam something?
Steam air machines, they were called. And-
Okay, that's what I didn't
And
have.
did I give you pictures of
I
this?
think so.
I think so.
But what I have in my note is steam, and I thought, steam what? I mean, he didn't create steam.
Well, it was really pretty amazing. Did I describe to you, if you want to do this on the movie, you might like to do it, but they set up these steam air machines that were manufactured by U.S. Hoffman to press garments in the dry cleaning business. And they would take the garment to be pressed and put it over the top of this machine, which had a cover on it. And then inside the cover was a steaming unit that made steam and hot air. It was a big machine, and they still use them in the dry cleaning trade. And they would put the garment to be pressed over the top, and then they would step on a lever that would shoot out the steam and inflate the bag that inside the garment to be pressed, and it would press against the garment from the inside and mold itself to it and knock out all the wrinkles. And then they would shoot out hot air to dry it from the steam, and then they would didn't have to iron it with an iron. And it was a big step forward in the dry cleaning industry. And the United States Hoffman Machinery Company has built those machines for years, and there are other companies who have built those machines when their patents expired. And my husband originally worked for them. And he designed covers to fit the machine so that the garment manufacturers could use these machines to press the garments that they manufactured in their apparel shops. Okay. And so they it was a big business for them to go into the big apparel companies, and it used to be all over the South. There were many, many companies that manufactured garments. And as the Chinese and the Japanese people took over that business, the Koreans, they put the companies out of business in this country that made the machines, and they manufactured the machines over there. But even the Koreans bought covers from us to put on to the machines because they couldn't function without this cover that went over the machine and then inflated on the inside and knocked the wrinkles out. That was a very original idea, and it generated a whole industry, and it was a big one. But using them for the apparel manufacturers themselves was an idea that my husband had. And that was what he did. He went around the country and he set up the Hoffman machine and designed it just for the garments that these people were manufacturing. So it was he had a big staff under him, and he was gone all the time. And we as a young married couple starting our family and living in a little town in the country felt bereft when he went off. He was gone all the time. And so we finally decided that we could while he was doing that, we set up the shop to manufacture these bags.
And this is 1951 at this point, or earlier?
Did I explain this adequately to you, Nancy, when I talked to you before?
Your first shop was at the village store?
Well, no, we started in the shop across the street that is now Sid's.
The old blacksmith shop.
It was an old blacksmith shop.
Okay.
And we manufactured the covers that inflated it inside the garments over there. And we had sewing machines over there, and we cut them over there. And I supervised that while Sid was traveling all around the country for U.S. Hoffman. This is for the birds, it's not for us. And he quit working for Hoffman, but they continued to buy the covers from us.
Oh.
So then we had that was the beginning of hall manufacturing in 1951. And I think I gave you quite a lot of pictures of various steam air machines and stuff like that. I gave you all I had. So there are no more to give you.
Well, I will dig that out. We will pour through that together. Now, did you move that shop from the blacksmith shop down to the village store?
We had both. We didn't have enough room in the shop across the street, and
how many years were you in the village store then? Approximately. Do you remember?
Total number of years we operated was about 50 years, but that was after Sid died that I stopped. What is your question again?
You had your manufacturing first in the blacksmith shop, and then
right.
Did you move it to the village store?
I don't think we had it first in the blacksmith shop, did we?
Yeah, it was started in the blacksmith shop, and then at some year he moved over to the store.
Oh, when he was working for Textron still, they had some products. They wanted the steam air covers manufactured for their machine. And we started the business, and I guess we must have started it down there.
Well, when I was a kid, I worked at the cutting table down over the store.
But we had the cutting table up at the shop across the street before it went down there. So.
Right, yeah, so some year you moved down there.
So at some point, it just kept growing. It was always,
And then
we added on or found places and ways to get the production out and have places.
And then it eventually moved up to Route 13 and 130, and that's when you expanded into the tote bag business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you remember what year you started up at the...
I think it was probably, it was in the 1960s. We started in 51, I'm pretty sure that's correct. And
what year did you close it?
50 years later. So it was
2001.
No, it wasn't 71.
Oh, it couldn't be 1971 because you were still manufacturing out there when I moved down.
That was 2001.
2001 probably, around that time, we had a huge sale and sold everything off to people in one weekend.
But that was in the 80s or 90s.
No, well,
Well, Sid died in
86.
86, so it was after 86.
Well, I was in town in 1995, and I remember your sale going on after
Yeah.
that time. So
Yeah.
that's around 2000 or 2001.
Yeah, I think it was in 2000 that I finally closed the whole thing.
Right.
But we had been in business 50 years at that point, I
Well,
think.
Scotty Knowles still has something that he bought from you, a backpack, or
And a lot
he
of
said they
people
just
do.
last forever.
Yeah.
I didn't get that.
So, she said Scotty Knowles has a backpack that you made there.
Oh, we made backpacks. We made anything that came along somebody needed to have stitched. I mean, in production, not just custom-made things. We would try to manufacture them for them if we could agree on a price.
So tell me a small list of the things that you gotten involved with. What kind of things did you manufacture?
Well, I have notes on that.
Every kind. We started with only steam air things. Then we branched out into other things for the dry cleaners.
Okay.
And we made pads for the machines and lots of dry products that dry cleaners need for pressing stuff. They have those big pressers that come down, and there are pads that go on those. We had a whole line of covers, and we sold to dry cleaning jobbers all over the country. And
Then you got into the tote bags, and you had made them for the Rockefeller resorts all over the world. And they
yes.
silk screened their logos on them.
Well, somebody came to us before, and what was the name of that company?
That was a place up in Maine that sold
Yeah.
tote bags. I can't remember her name. She had a small shop in Ogunquit.
LL Bean, did you
No.
say, you didn't do the
We did make stuff for LL Bean over the years, but canoe straps and things.
We actually did things for LL Bean, and LL Bean would say to me when I was talking to them about doing it, that if they sold well, they'd make them themselves.
Oh.
But if they didn't, they would agree to not make them and buy from us on contract. So we did contract stitching for them.
Then you did a lot of firefighting equipment stuff. Those giant red tubes that the stitchers used to get buried under trying to stitch them together. They were like 100-foot long, big, huge diameter tubes.
When you asked me this question, it's just, would go on forever. If Sid and I sat and really went through in our minds what we made, there would be hundreds of items.
So was that,
We finally called ourselves contract stitchers. And we stitched on contract, and that was but the main business always was making those covers for the dry cleaning machines, the steam air covers that inflated inside the big machine. And what I was going to start to tell you, which I think might make an interesting story for a video, is that Sid would set up in a garment company a bank of these machines. Like they would have 15 or 20 of the machines set up, and the one operator would operate 2 machines, and she would take the garment that was to be pressed, that had just been made in this apparel company, and she would put it on the first machine and pull it down over the top of this cover. And then she would step on a button, and this cover would inflate inside the machine and press that machine. It took about 20 seconds for it to give it this burst of steam and knock out all the wrinkles. Then she would come back to it at the end of the 20 seconds or so, and step on the other button, and it would shoot out the hot air. Then she would take off that garment that was now all pressed and set it over a rack and put another garment on. In the meantime, during the 20 seconds that it was going on, she put another garment over on the second machine, stepped on that one, and then she went back to the first one. So she could actually press 10 or 15, I think they could press 5 slips a minute.
Reminds me of when we used to stitch the Bible covers. Dad invented this round Lazy Susan so that I sat there and I glued down the ends of the Bible cover zippers, and I applied the glue and then turned the big Lazy Susan around. By the time it got all the way back to the first cover, about 20 covers later, the glue was set up just right to press down. Dad invented just, for every purpose, he invented some little machine. It was all kinds of machines.
When it came time to stuff Mr. Wowell, he invented a machine where he could load all of the kapok that they were going to be stuffed with into this big bin, and then he had a paddle that went around inside this container that held the kapok, and then he put a vacuum cleaner on the other end and sucked it into the Mr. Wowell, and we would have kapok all over the ceiling, all over the walls, all over the floor. It was an amazing thing. We made seat covers for captain's chairs, you know, and he rigged up a old laundry mangle so that it pulled the material through, and then he had 2 sewing machines rigged up so that they would put hems on the sides, and then it would roll off onto another laundry mangle, and then he could come along and cut it off with a power knife. And we made thousands of seats for chairs. And it was an amazing operation because he was so ingenious in being able to figure out ways to make things that other people couldn't do. So we were able to get these contracts to do things because they were unique in the way he was able to solve a problem that other people couldn't figure out how to stitch. He'd figure it out. So it became a very varied type of operation. We had the tote bags going for the stores that wanted to sell tote bags, and other things, including Mr. Wowell and anything else that we could. We started direct mail ourselves, and we made our own catalog, and every customer that came into the store could sign on to get my catalog, and for years they bought from my catalog. After they came in the store once, they got to be a regular customer of our mail order business. And I gave you some of the catalogs that we made, and all kinds of different products that we put in the catalog. And so we really had, and the kids all worked in the business, and Sid was a good cutter, which is a very skilled job because you cut layers and layers of fabric at once with big power knives, and they learned to do that. So it was a very interesting business, and when he was alive, it was full of intriguing new approaches. Laurie Dixon and some of the other people who took over after he was gone, after he died very suddenly, really did awfully well to continue to make some of these ingenious things, that make patterns and all of that sort of thing. But he was greatly missed. He was the entrepreneur. He was the originator of ideas that other people couldn't do, that they came to us to see if we could do them. And almost always he would figure out a way to do them, and most often in very ingenious ways. So we got a reputation for being able to do innovative things. So we had our contract business, we had our mail order business, we had our store, our own store, which you say you have been in, and then we had all these jobbers and manufacturers that had us do contract stuff for them. So it was never a dull moment. There was always something different going on. And then, in addition to that, he was very active in all of the recreation stuff in the town. He started the Recreation Commission, and he worked with the Camp Tevye to set up the Grove. So he did all those things while I was busy doing my extra things at the legislature. And then I guess I told you I taught school also for some years.
Do people come to you with individual requests?
Pardon?
Did people come to the manufacturing company for individual requests, for something special?
Well,
that you weren't manufacturing?
We would seldom make one of a kind. Mm-hmm. If they came to us with a request for making 50 of something, we would take it on, no matter who came to us. You know, I'm saying that to give you a rough idea of what we would do and what we wouldn't do. We didn't make one of a kind. If somebody wanted a tent made, we didn't do it. But if they wanted 50 tents made, we had a guy who came who wanted us to make a tent for an outhouse that could be carried with you when you went on a camping trip. And he called it a weepy teepee. And I thought he was going to sell 1 million of them just for the name. But anyway, Sid built him a thing that was like a teepee that you could use when you were out on the trail. And it did not sell particularly well because it was too expensive and it weighed too much. People didn't want to carry it. But it was funny, but that was the sorts of things that would happen. And if Sid thought he could make it and make it so that somebody could sell it, the item, he would design it for them. He was a very good, I never could do that. That wasn't my part of the business at all. I never sat down to a sewing machine. Sid would sit down to a sewing machine and he could stitch anything. And he could repair any sewing machine, and he could do anything with a sewing machine. Not me.
I've got two questions. You mentioned K-Pack. That's the stuffing for Mr. Wow. K-Pack?
K-pop.
K-pop.
Can you spell that for me first of all? And is it just like a woven or like describe it for me?
It's like cotton.
Okay.
Fluffy.
Oh.
It's fluffy, yeah.
Is that a good description?
Yeah.
And it's spelled K-A-P-O-C?
K-A-P-O-K. It was a trade name for.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And it was nasty stuff. Oh. And some of it was not as clean as we would have liked it to be. It was, I think it came out of a plant. I really don't remember the what it was, but
it wasn't something organic. It was something.
it was organic.
It was, yeah, but
Yeah.
not cotton. It was something else.
It was like cotton, but it wasn't cotton.
Yeah.
Cotton could be cleaned,
Yeah.
but it was an organic material.
Yeah. And the
You
same-
might be able to find just something more about that. I haven't ever researched
I can look it up
the
probably
composition of it. It was not stuff I like to have around. When my grandmother died before my husband did, and just as soon as she died, we stopped making the Mr. Wow.
online. No.
And we were glad to stop because we made an awful lot of them and they were really tough to make. And Annie did a wonderful job with them when she did. Making one of them is one thing, but making hundreds and thousands of them is something else.
Now, Annie Quigley, she related to, or did we already establish that?
Yeah, I have all that.
That's the grandmother,
Yeah,
right?
that's Bill's grandmother.
Okay, got it.
Bill is, yes, because Annie Quigley was married to the first Bill Quigley.
Yeah.
They had a son, Bill Quigley, who was Bill's father.
Yes, okay.
Then Bill.
She was a wonderful lady. She
I know,
did everything in the community. And she took care of the old folks in her family as well as her children. And I remember going into her living room and she had 4 hospital beds set up in her living room. And she was taking care of 4 bedridden elderly grandparents. On top of everything else she was doing. She was really an amazing lady.
I don't know if you've talked about it, but it's also interesting that you had some original people that were stitchers, like Miriam Jepson and Dottie Hale and Louise Marshall, who stayed with they started in 1951 and they stayed with the business all the way through, practically. Not all of them, but some of them did.
Well, I still had 4 of the original stitchers with me when I retired.
Years later.
I have down here Maurice's mother, and that was Louise Marshall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Dorothy Bobian,
Yes. She was a pheasant.
Miriam Jepson, I had her name, and Maud,
Lumen.
Luman.
Yes. and all of them were really
They were very loyal. I have
our
they were
friends
very
and
loyal to
our
you.
neighbors, and we really had a familial relationship with our employees. And
Maud worked there until she was in her 90s, wasn't she?
who?
Maud.
Oh yeah.
She was a tough old bird. She one time, she let out this little yelp and she had put the needle right through her finger.
Oh,
And she just got up and pulled it out and said, it's okay, and wrapped it up and kept working.
Can you imagine? She was something else. she always had an amulet around her neck with garlic in it. And she felt that it kept her healthy. And the other operators all objected to the smell of the garlic all the time.
She outlived them.
She did.
Hey, Scott?
Yeah.
Is there a chance you could stop it for just a second?
Yeah.
And I could just ask some questions?
What did you want to do?
Oh, is that the way you... Oh, that's your
Yeah,
recording.
I got it.
That's good.